Well, tensions are simmering at Wits University, where students today are continuing their protest for proper funding and accommodation. My colleague Silindelo Masikane is there watching the developments there. Those are the visuals. That's the suspended SRC President currently who's addressing the students. Let's take a listen.
You want your boss to come and address us. Your boss must come and tell the students why he suspended me. He must stop sending you. And if you're going to defend your boss, you're going to defend our rights as students. Yes. Let's move in song.
Bradan, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm struggling with connection at the moment. However, we are back inside the Wits campus in Braamfontein, and as you can see from the visuals in front of you, we have the suspended Wits SRC President, Mnyamana, who is addressing protesting students from the steps of the Great Hall. And you would remember that Mnyamana is suspended, and according to his suspension notice, he is not supposed to be on Wits property. At this point, we had an opportunity to speak to him earlier when the protesting students went onto the streets of Braamfontein, and he said that he will allow his legal representatives to deal with the issues around his suspension. At this point, he is demanding that the Wits VC, Zeblon Vilagazi, address him. He wants a meeting with him, a one-on-one meeting with him. And before we actually went on air, we saw scuffles breaking out between the protesting students as well as security. I'm going to ask Sita to just walk with me towards the security so you can just see remnants of exactly what took place here. You can see that we've got some students that are still basically antagonizing security that is stationed outside the Great Hall. When they arrived on campus, they began hurling mud. It's been raining for the past 20 minutes or so, and they started hurling mud at the security personnel, and as well as trying to make their way inside the Wits hall. However, security then pepper sprayed them, and that is how they were able to contain the situation. You can see now that students are moving towards the matrix, and in fact they are joined by some members of Nehau who are represented by that union in the university. And at this point, you could say that tensions are rising, and that it's unclear exactly what the next plan of action is for students, but it does look as though the students are still being led by the SRC president. The demand is that all 6 SRC representatives who have been suspended, they want those suspensions lifted, but of course the main issues being around financial exclusion as well as accommodation that they're demanding to be addressed. We know that there are at least 13 demands, mainly around the issues of registration, as well as issues of historical debt. Now, according to the university itself, they say that they've made a number of concessions in order to try and address the issues that have been put forward by the SRC, but they're saying that historical debt, which amounts to more than R1 billion, the university simply cannot just scrap that. It would not be financially feasible. We also heard from Mnyamana that he is demanding a meeting with the Vice-Chancellor, and I have received a message from the university saying that in terms of the meeting between between NSFAS, between higher education, Wits management, as well as the SRC, that meeting, before it can be planned, the VC has actually also requested a meeting with the Premier outside of mediation, before mediation can take place. So they're saying that in due course that meeting will be organized. However, the VC also wants to have a word with the Premier before going into mediation processes with him, with all stakeholders, Bradan.
Yeah, so the process of discussing the demands of the students, including now the latest demand by Apiwe Mnyamana for him to be reinstated after he was suspended yesterday, that process still very much underway, still very much fluid. What is the sentiment of the student about the suspension of Apiwe?
But Dan, if you could please just repeat that for me.
What is the sentiment of the students about the suspension of Apiwe?
Yes. Okay. So in terms of students and their sentiments, you can see that it has angered them for the most part. They're saying that these suspensions are being done to intimidate them, to get them to stop protesting. But they're saying that they're not going to be deterred by any form of what they call intimidation from the university. They're saying that these suspensions have no merit, whereas the university itself, Bradan, is saying that those who've been suspended have been suspended not for protesting peacefully, but for inciting violence, for destroying property, and not really basically protesting peacefully. So those are the reasons coming forth from the university. But protesting students believe that there is actually more to these suspensions, that it's a way to try and intimidate them.
So at this stage, are the students dispersing now? We saw them earlier with you on the streets of Braamfontein as it was raining. Now they are on campus and they seem to be dispersing. Is this the end of the protest action today? Are we expecting more later?
At this point in time, Bradan, all I can say is that the situation is fluid. I can't tell you if this is the end for the day or what's going to happen, but I mean, when they were in Braamfontein, it was raining quite heavily. And I should mention that, in fact, when we spoke to the suspended SRC president, he was saying that they're going to render the university ungovernable. And while they were in Braamfontein, they were actually taking people out of the circuit buses, the Wits circuit buses, demanding that they come out, demanding that the buses go back to the depot. So at this moment in time, what we understand is that protest action is going to continue. Whether it's going to continue today, that's unclear. But certainly for the rest of the week or until their demands are met, protesting students as well as the SRC have said that protest action will continue. It does seem as though they're going up to the SRC offices to perhaps reconvene, perhaps strategize, but you can see that the suspended Wits SRC president is on Wits property. He is engaging students and is also demanding a one-on-one with the vice-chancellor of the university.
From my understanding, his suspension meant that he can't be on campus, or did I hear wrongly? And if I heard correctly, what are the implications of Apiwe being there?
Bradan, I'm going to try and just actually pull up the statement that was released of Apiwe's suspension in terms of where he's supposed to be. But from what I understand is that since his suspension, he is not supposed to be on campus. We're going to move in towards the matrix. But from what we understand, Bradan, he's not actually supposed to be on campus. His suspension notice actually says that he is barred from participating in any activities of the university, and that in fact until he has a disciplinary process, that he should not be on the property. I'm going to read from the statement, and it says he will not be allowed to access any of the Wits precincts, participate in any university activities, and engage in conduct which constitutes student privileges, and will not be allowed to stay in Wits residences until the legal processes is finalized. So that was the official statement from the university, Brother.
Yeah, now where are you walking up to? What's happening next, Dee?
So as you can see, we're actually walking up to the SRC offices. They're inside the matrix, which is where students usually get food, and it does seem as though protesting students are being provided with some lunch packs in order for them I guess, to just, replenish themselves. I mean, they did start protesting at around 11 o'clock this morning, peacefully, but of course it has for some aspects descended into chaos. And you can see that many of them, Brother, are actually wearing masks, and that is to protect their own identities.
Yeah, and because of maybe they're fearing some repercussions. Okay, so now they're getting lunch, and we don't know what's going to happen next. We've heard from the university management earlier saying that the process to try and resolve this is underway. My final question to you this hour, Silindelo, is do we understand or do we know why Professor Zebulon Vilakazi wants to meet with the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, ahead of any mediation?
At this point, I could only assume it's because the Premier, in fact, had met with the SRC separately as well. And that was because the SRC had approached the Premier to try and get a mediation process going. So my assumption at the moment is that the VC would also perhaps like the privilege of a separate meeting before mediation processes take place, so that perhaps the Premier and anyone else who's going to be in that mediation will perhaps understand where the university itself is coming from.
Okay. Thank you very much, Silindelo Masikane, for this hour. We'll leave it there. Please do take care. We'll pick up with you if there are any developments this afternoon. As we've just seen, as we can see, it looks like the students now are on a lunch break of sorts, grabbing some packets of the food parcels that have been put together. And we don't know if there'll be further protests this afternoon. And the suspended SRC President Piwe Mnyamana is on site. And according to a statement issued by the university management, parts of which Silindelo Masikane was reading for us a short while ago, he's not supposed to be on campus at all. So we wonder what are the implications of him being there, defying that suspension. And he's demanding to meet with Professor Zebulon Vilakazi. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen there.